Welcome, Audrey. We're so happy to have you.
I'm so excited to be here and to be talking with you.
Will you share with us how you have gone on this journey and found breath work as medicine?
Yeah. So it really came to me out of a necessity for healing. I was in a really difficult place physically and mentally a while back. It's been about 6 years. And I had been studying meditation for a little while, but I wasn't actively experiencing it. And so, like, just little pop ups here and there of experiences. And I began to apply meditation when I sort of was at what would be my like ground zero. And at the same time, I was also pursuing some physical healing for some neural related problems that were happening in my body. And I found myself in a hyperbaric chamber, which is breathing pure oxygen in a pressurized environment. And meditation was coming into there, and I was beginning to step into being more conscious of how I was breathing while I was in this chamber, trying to maximize. Well, if I'm supposed to be in here and I'm supposed to be breathing, then I'm going to drop into a meditation. I'm going to focus on the breath. I'm going to get as much out of this 90 minutes in this tube as I possibly can, because really I wanted to live. And so that was the most effective thing in treating a chronic and really difficult to manage and diagnose and infrastructure illness that had been going on for years. And I had not had much respite from it, so to
Mm.
speak. And so I knew I was onto something, because it was like really working. And it, for some reason, was working better for me than some of the other people I knew who were also engaging in hyperbaric treatments. And I realized it was because, like, they were getting in and just letting like the mask and their natural rhythms of breath be the way that they consumed um, this pure oxygen in this pressurized environment. And I um, decided I was going to study breathing. So that's what I did for several years. And I would bring that into my practices in the hyperbaric chamber, but also into a daily meditation practice that was actually well underway at that point as a resource for healing as well. And things kind of got cataclysmically crazy at that time and rapid. And
Mm.
I saw a lot of success in that. And so that's kind of what brought me to breath work as a practice and as a medicine, which is why most of my work is centered around that sentiment, breath work as medicine. And breathing itself is medicinal, but breath work, like the work bit of it, the awareness of it, is a real necessary component of using the respiratory system and the anatomy of, and intelligence of our human bodies to contribute to our own well-being in all the facets of the human physical experience. And so when we're in breath work, the work of it, the necessity of the work of it, combined with the intelligence of breathing, creates medicine. It's
Mm.
chemistry. It's actually creating, a potion, so to speak, of chemicals that are there in the right equation to create health and well-being. And I also felt like we were really missing from our society the awareness of it. I had spent a lot of my time in hospitals from early childhood forward. I've always had a lot of physical medical challenges and just felt really undereducated. Like, whether that was from our school system or our healthcare industry, I was studying things about how my body works that I either didn't absorb or I wasn't taught. And it's probably some combination of that, right? And just really felt passionate about, I think people should know this. This is our medicine. We're all breathing as a human species. This medicine is no respecter of any, like it's just, it's for everyone. And how many of us might not actually be connected to the power of it, the access to it, and what am I doing to contribute to that educational experience in the collective? So it's a community offering.
Well, I think back about, I think it was almost 20 years ago, the first time that I ever did yoga, and the first time that I feel like my lungs fully expanded, and had honestly never thought of the breath until that moment. And this
Uh,
feeling like, oh, this feels so good.
yeah,
And to just never really think about the breath, never think about how it fuels my whole body and oxygenates all of my systems.
yeah.
And I think that's how most of us are. We we
Mm-hmm.
we breathe up in our chest and even in our throat and never take a full breath.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good consensus for the collective condition, right? And I just thought, okay, well, this is a way that I feel good about showing up in community and tribe of, here, if you want to learn about this, cool. Like, but you have to want to. I learned early in my career, like I wanted everyone to have it. And so I was real like exuberant around like trying to give it to people. And I quickly learned, oh no, they actually have to want it. So, anybody who's ready to receive a return to self, because really it's coming back to self and coming back to the power that the individual possesses to contribute to their lived experience.
Yeah. And so you did all this research on your own, had very much, this awareness, and then was it in that timeline that then you started practicing on your own and
So
bringing
all
people
through
into
that,
that?
I'm like
Okay.
I've been studying. I actually was raised by a librarian. And
That
I
sounds magical, by the
it
way.
was magical, by the way. And my mother ones are serious, but very serious. But this was one of the magical components of my upbringing, and I learned how to research from a really young age. And I was a really curious individual with a super curious mind, and so that was my way of accessing that. And so my studies, it's continuing even today. I started implementing experimentation with breath work from the hyperbaric chamber forward. So all through the study, and I'm a little bit scientific in nature. Like I have a number of field journals where here's what this created. And I did a lot of just experimentation. At one point in time, I decided that I was going to study Kundalini because it's so breath work focused. And I studied that for a year with a program. So sometimes it's been formal. And sometimes it's been informal and sort of just in my home lab, what kind of happens when we build meditations on a breathwork framework and experiment with different ways of breathing. There's a lot of, you've got, every, your body is a collection of tubes and you breathe out of three of them. And so you've got some variables there for how you breathe. And so just, there's a lot to play with in reality. And yeah, it's just been that's been an ongoing process that's still happening. And I love that it's still happening.
So what would you kind of share around like the very basics of the breath?
I think even just awareness of how you're breathing. The breathing is it's a lever. We can actually, if I say change the way you're digesting your food right now, you can't do it really, right? And so it's this system that we can immediately change how it's operating. And so when we step into, oh, I'm aware that I'm inhaling. I'm aware of that moment, that pause, and I'm aware that I'm exhaling. And being less hooked into like, what is the count, or how am I
Mm,
doing it, or what's going on? Like the baseline has just got to be, well, what does it feel like to breathe, and like not be all weird around it and want to do it a certain way. Like,
yes.
can we just experience an awareness of, oh, I'm aware that at the moment, like my breath feels really shallow and I don't feel like sitting up and opening up my lung space, or like just allowing yourself to connect to how you're breathing and asking the question, well, how do I want to breathe? What do I want this to feel like? What do I want in my awareness of the inhale and in my awareness of the exhale to experience, or those pauses? You really got 4 points. And so, or do I want to, what does it feel like to breathe out of my, in and out of my mouth versus my nose? And there's just the awareness piece. I think self-experimentation, while I could give you like so many different types of breathwork practices, and a lot of what I do is that. And also it's like, but if that baseline of just stepping into awareness isn't there, it becomes really problematic, and people need to be guided always. And that's not my intention in helping people learn how to breathe. And so just, hey, I'm aware. I'm aware.
I like what you're saying. And what I'm also hearing is that there isn't a right way or a wrong way. Like
Mm,
it is having that awareness in the breath. And again, going back to yoga, because we do a lot of breathing in yoga, um, the practice that I now have, it isn't. Before I felt like it was very rigid, like one breath, one movement, this and that. And my breathing extends beyond one movement, and it isn't that. And for so long I was trying to like breathe and catch up, and this feeling of like doing it wrong.
mm,
But then this like letting go of that expectation and like, no, my body knows exactly what it's doing, and it's just going to be that.
yeah. I think there, a big part of breathwork as medicine as a course is teaching what's actually going on in your body when you're breathing,
Mm.
and specifically what's going on when you breathe in certain ways. And it's not to say that one way is right or wrong, it's to say, here's what's happening in your body, and what do you want to be happening in your body? And what you want to be happening in your body is variable based on what you're doing, what how you're feeling. A whole number of factors come into that. And so there can't be, generally speaking, a right or wrong way to breathe. There can be a right way for you based on the present moment to breathe. And when you understand what's going on in the body, when you have that anatomical education to go, okay, here's what's happening when I'm breathing in and out of my nose. Here's what's happening when I'm breathing in and out of my mouth, or when I'm breathing in through my nose and out my mouth, or however we want to look at it. There's around 8 core variables of breathing patterns that have different chemical exchange is happening. And so what you're creating in your body is also variable. And when you understand that basic anatomical chemistry of breathing, then you can go, okay, what needs to be applied right now in this moment for me to create what I want to create in the chemistry of my physiology? And that just gives all the power of the well-being in the moment to the individual.
Yeah. In the course that you're working on right now, it's centered around. Will you share a little bit about the course? But then, do you
Mm-hmm.
mind sharing how you're creating that right now with
Mm-hmm.
the divine feminine and the divine masculine as part of
Yeah.
that?
So breathwork as medicine as a course is a 4-day workshop. It's usually like a retreat type style. I teach it 4 times a year. The next one is happening in Bear Lake, the Bear Lake area, at the end of May. And I've never taught it the same. It's always evolving and shifting. And so it implements the core teachings around the anatomical science as I've known them, and sometimes they shift and evolve or deepen, or I relanguage it to be more accessible, because that's something we really need as a human species, is to access the teachings. So I'm always kind of refining that. And I also like to implement an infrastructure within the infrastructure of the workshop. So the umbrella infrastructure is sort of how the anatomical science of breathing, the physiological science of breathing. And then the infrastructure within, or the sort of theme or vibe or style, is based on something comprehensive that's shown up in the last 6 years of my experimentation. That's about when my experimentation began. So there's been times where I've used like a chakra framework to bring into breathwork as medicine, as a way that we then implement medicine into some practices, some breathing medicine. We take the anatomy into like the energetic medicine of our emotions and our lived experiences. This time, that's always an intuitive process. So like when I complete a BAM, I take a period of time to just kind of reset. I don't pay much attention to it for a little bit, but when I step back into development and prep for the next one, it's like, what is showing up for me? And what am I working on? Because I believe in resonance. I believe in what is, attracting mirrors and reflections, and people that are working on the same thematic things in their life. And what is going on individually is also some representation of what is going on collectively. And the relationship between the masculine and feminine energy just kept popping up and popping up and popping up. And so that's what's being built into BAM, where once the anatomy is set, where we're experiencing breath work as it connects to the masculine and feminine energy. And one of the things I love so much about that is that in the tubes that are our nostrils, at the top of our sort of nose, at the bridge of our nose, we have neural endings. Well, our face, our hands, our feet, that's sort of where all the nerves end. That's where you get a lot of stuff around reflexology, or like tapping or things like that. But we also have in the nostril space access to two of the core channels in our nervous system that are represented in the masculine and feminine energy. Like scientifically, this is not even me speaking woo woo. This is like, scientists have proven that the nervous system has these two channels. They're often depicted in anatomy graphics as red and blue line, like sort of serpentining lines that come up and they exit right here. And so when you play with breathing out of the right and left nostril with specificity, you're accessing the masculine and feminine energy specifically. And that's just one way that I apply a breathing practice into gaining access into, well, what is the relationship that you're having with the masculine or the feminine? And, let's look at that as we get meditative and we breathe into the right side of the body to breathe into the masculine and check out what's happening there, and explore that and kind of resolve some of what is stuck and unprocessed in those spaces that the body is holding. Nietzsche has this quote that says the body holds more wisdom than your greatest philosophy ever could. And it's, breath work is embodiment, and you drop down into there and you get to explore certain things and be specific about your focus. And the human life is about relationships, and the relationship between the masculine and feminine is fraught with a lot of problems at this time in human history. And I think it's really needed. It's been a really needed avenue of exploration for me. So that's the infrastructure this time around.
And people can attend your retreat as an individual, but they can also attend as a couple.
Correct. The couple spots are all taken for May, with the exception of, you're welcome to attend as a couple, but you will be sleeping in bunk beds. So if that works for you, cool. But there are 8 individual beds remaining. Those couple of spots have all been secured this time around. The next time will be in October. I haven't decided where as of yet, but yes, you can attend. And really, it's about the relationship to the masculine, feminine within, and then looking at the relationship to specifically the mother, father. And then from there, looking at, well, what is my relationship to being in relationship with the masculine externally? And what is my relationship to being in relationship with the feminine externally? And regardless of your identification of gender.
So share more about that. Share more about how we connect with the masculine and the feminine within the breath.
Yeah. Well, when you're setting intention to, maybe you're going to work on, or 2 women reflecting at one another right now, 2 humans that identify as feminine. And there's a lot of sister wounds, as I call them, that are present in the relationship to the feminine. And so when we set an intention to work on that relationship, that sister wound, really we're looking at our relationship to ourself, feminine to feminine, that internal sisterhood. And I like to bring form. I think people, that one of the things I love about the retreat is people can become that form that we're focused on here in my medicine room, or in my own individual practice, and the way that I coach people in meditation architecture for healing is what represents that thing. In this case, we're talking about the sister wound. What represents that? Maybe it's like a poster of Mean Girls. I don't know. Like, what is that thing for you that helps you look at how the feminine energy is in relationship to the feminine energy? And then what are you, maybe it's, I love a formula. I run most of my meditation experiences through a formula of connecting to breath, getting into that awareness, that baseline awareness, allowing the body to move. For me, that's pretty yogic. So it's like breath and then movement, such a good embodiment formula. And if it's like I'm working on sister wound, what kind of music am I associating to that or playing to that? Or maybe I just like, girls just want to have fun. Like, maybe I'm looking at the relationship that we have to one another that is joyful, and I experience that and allow myself to move in really intuitive ways, and then getting really still and stepping into the awareness of the inhale and the exhale, and the feminine masculine nature of even just the inhaling, the receiving, and the exhaling, releasing. And then maybe I'm popping, a thumb up and closing my right nostril, which is the masculine side, and I'm breathing in and out of the left nostril, the feminine side, for 5 to 7 minutes. And I'm usually got noise canceling headphones on, and I'm, really queuing up music that drops me into that kind of relationship, and exploring that and breathing into it and breathing into that side, and feeling it and giving attention to it, and looking at my stories, looking at what's kind of going. Meditation for me has not ever been like a no mind situation. It's been a deep mind situation for me, a curiosity, a exploration of relationship to self. So then it really does feel like a sisterhood conversation, me having a conversation with me. Tell me more about that. Like, let's talk about some of our experiences in relationship to other women, and what comes out of that. And then there's sort of a closing and a stillness for me, where I release so much activity around it. And then often some writing. Writing is such an incredible way to process. If I really want to focus on my breathing for the duration of a meditation practice, I throw some mouth tape on, because it requires, like, I'm a little bit of an organic mouth breather, actually. And so if I have mouth tape on, my body is forced to think about breathing. And So that's a really good way for me to say for the next hour or whatever, like no matter what's happening, I'm very, whether I'm in the writing sequence or whatever I'm in, I'm breathing because my mouth tape is on.
And tell me, I don't even know where you find mouth tape.
Yeah, yeah,
Amazon.
yeah. You can totally, and there's a whole bunch of different kinds on Amazon. I think it kind of,
Not duct tape.
no, please don't put duct tape. You want to put something on that doesn't affect your skin in a detrimental way. And, you can find them at a lot through a lot of sources that are focused on sleep apnea problems, because it's one of the ways that can be attended to if the anatomical attributions are proper. You don't want to kind of play around with that stuff. You want to make sure that you're okay while you're sleeping. But yeah, it's accessible if you go look for it, for sure.
Last weekend, I got a facial and they put this gel all over my eyes and my mouth. And it started as like panic, right? Because like we want to open our eyes and we want to open our mouth,
Yeah.
but went into the breath. And I think that's the only time ever in my life where I was able to so focus on my nostrils, right? Like to really understand that I am safe, right? And
Mm-hmm.
to get to that place within the breath of, being safe and
Mm-hmm.
um allowing the breath to calm down. But I like this idea of um taking away almost one of our senses.
Yeah.
But it's more than that. It's more than just, your taste, but your mouth and yeah, just being able to breathe
Yeah.
that way.
I'm glad you brought that up because I actually think it can be very, very triggering for people. It's triggering for me. It's not that I don't meet the trigger every single time I put the mouth tape on. There's a few moments, sometimes minutes in the beginning where I feel that panic kind of surface within me and I get really uncomfortable. And I even have the thought like, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And it's like, no, but you are breathing, sweetie. Like, can I guide myself? Like, but Audrey, you're breathing. We're okay. Like, this is going to pass and you are safe, and facilitating myself a little bit. I've always been a really good self facilitator. And that's because
Mm.
I'm, I'm kind of an only child and sort of bounced between parents who neither of whom really wanted me. And so I spent a lot of time on my own, and, um, that fostered like this unique thing where a lot of people can't facilitate themselves in that kind of an experience. And I know that I've just had the luxury of a lot of practice, both formally and just my childhood kind of built that. But that moment of panic with mouth tape on is actually to be expected. Um, I think there's a real need to address for the feminine specifically that through the mouth and the yoni, if you look at them anatomically on a chart, especially the vocal cords look just like a vagina. Like they're nearly identical, and they're both tubes because our whole body is made up of tubes where
Mm.
things enter and exit. They're one of our
Mm.
major enter and exit points. And often women who are having throat chakra issues also have that's connected to sexual trauma and vice versa. And so putting mouth tape on the mouth can also trigger some of that kind of stuff. And what I love about mouth tape is it's like, well, if I'm going to work on that, then ride or die, let's do it. So for me, I go towards that kind of stuff, which I think makes me a little bit strange in some ways. And yeah, I mean, I think people find that really, really weird. But I love seeing what can help me do something dangerous safely. I believe in doing dangerous things safely. And I think exploring sexual trauma and healing and processing that is dangerous. And so, what does it look like to make sure that that's happening safely? And that's all about set and setting and facilitation. But mouth tape is an awesome resource.
What is the one question that people always ask you? Like, do you find yourself like always answering a question from people that you meet in your community or that come to you from
Yeah.
classes? Is there just like one maybe question that's always reoccurring that maybe our listeners have on their mind?
Well, I think that kind of depends on what the basis of sort of the curiosity is, because I've actually identified similar questions popping up in my life and community in a variety of fields. Like parenting is one of them. I have 6 kids. My kids are real interesting creatures, so people are very curious about our parenting. But if we're speaking to what happens when they find out that I'm a breathwork facilitator and breathing quite specifically, there is, it depends. But, people will be like, what is that? Like, why would anyone need to
Hmm.
be taught how to breathe? I think that's one of the main questions of why is that even a thing? And it's, to me, it's such a broad conversation. It's really hard to answer socially. And it also demonstrates the ignorant state of society around anatomy. And
And the opportunity to have that conversation and
yeah,
to bring that awareness.
yeah.
Um, are with 6 kids,
Mm-hmm.
how have you been able to integrate breath work
Mm-hmm.
as you are raising them?
Yeah. So for a little while, I homeschooled my boys and my younger 2 boys. So the two of the youngest two. And it was part of our daily sort of sequence. I like to have infrastructure in place with a lot of space for fluidity in my like actual life. So that was the infrastructure I put on homeschooling. And so um, those two have been taught from a really young age what stillness and breathing and like when to apply certain things based on what is being experienced, just through nurturing them from a really young age forward, like teaching them breath like I would teach them language. And so it's interesting to look at those two. And then my 4, we have a big age gap. And so we have the 4 that are older, and they range in age between 19 and 26, actually. And then we had a little over an 8-year gap, and we have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. And so those 4 older kids, they were not young children. And while I integrated that into our conversations there, I also had to give space for them to have their own curiosity about it and come to me about it and want to experiment or learn about it. All 4 of those kids are collegiate or pro athletes. And so optimizing athleticism and breathing eventually came into play for all of them. And they were like, this is interesting, Mom. Can we talk about breathing for a moment? And I've had an opportunity to integrate it into their lives in that way. So they've received the medicine in really different ways, the two like kind of groups of kids.
Well, I think it's always so fascinating to to think what our lives would have been like if we had had that when we were children. And I
Yeah.
think as a parent, that's one of, I think, the most beautiful gifts that we get to be witnesses of is experiencing our children doing something that like we're just barely grasping, right?
Yes.
Meditation in our home, and just I mean, we've got 14, an 11-year-old, and an 8-year-old, and it's still very very basic. But
Mm-hmm.
man, I wish I had known how to meditate when I was going into middle school and high school,
What a difference
and
it would have made.
but it's so fun to see them have these tools to be empowered and for them to
Mm-hmm.
have this different knowing than I ever did.
Yeah. And that's the role that you're playing, is that from the lack, from the scarcity of it, you are shifting and changing the inheritance. And there's a real, you can see that in generations of humans at this time. And you can see the kids beginning to create something far different from the basis of those shifts that their parents are engineering. And I think it was, a real necessary shift in the human species cyclic nature, because I think my generation of people who are parents to children creating those shifts just had accumulated so much mother and father wound from so many generations of people. That's just a lot of stuff unresolved,
Yeah.
unrepaired,
Yeah.
unevolved, and that's what you're describing.
But then to see this next generation that
Yeah,
really
to
is
witness it.
so much. I mean, it's not just like a 1 or 2%. Like,
It's a
if
lot.
every generation was like 1% better, we gradually get better. But I feel like the kids that are on the earth right now, I mean, they
Mhm.
are leaps and bounds,
Ahead of
and
everything.
oh, they are just
Yeah.
they're just so incredible.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I get to hang out with a good many of them. So,
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, and for teaching us about breath breath work as medicine. Is there
mm.
anything else that you'd like to share?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I usually like to just allow flow to kind of drop in what that message is. And the only thing that's sort of surfacing is, I think one of the things that people greet the most when they begin to play around with breathing is some version of what we were kind of talking about with the mouth tape, is fear of embodiment, really, fear of actually feeling and being present with, or we've become the society that is anesthetized and intoxicated and distracted, and have ADD and ADHD tendencies that are widespread, and we're all kind of living on that spectrum. And so when we begin to just focus on just breathing and being in the stillness of that, there is always a little bit of panic when that's just beginning to be curated and developed. And sometimes that can even occur for me still, based on what's going on in my life. It's not like this thing you skill set out of. You're we're on a planet of duality. We're having an experience with duality. And so we're always going to have experiences with fear. And that's one of the things I think that deters people. They greet that when they begin to start to practice and play around with meditation and breath work. And then there's like, I don't want to experience that. You know,
I don't
that
want to
was
look at that. Yeah.
that was uncomfortable. Like, I don't
Yeah.
want to do that. And our relationship to fear is deeply problematic. And I actually think that breath work is really just intimacy with fear. And
Mm.
just like when you're birthing a baby, one of the ways that you can get the body through that is through breathing. And it's something that you can be intimate with fear and survive it, and even move through it in a healthy fashion. And I think breathing is a big component of that. And it also is the thing that triggers it sometimes. And so when that shows up, knowing that it's sort of normal, the comfort of the normalcy of that, and an invitation to go beyond your perceived limitations around being intimate with that fear,
Mm.
I think is a really important piece in helping people really have a successful experience with breathing.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Audrey. I
You're so
appreciate you.
welcome.
So glad we could connect.
Thank you.
And tell us a little bit, how can our listeners connect with you?
So many ways. I have a website, thebreathingco.com. I'm on Instagram, just at the Breathing Co. My Instagram handle has a lot of anatomical stuff and breathwork connected stuff, but also just a lot. I love to write a lot of just deep musings that often have come from my practices and my own explorations of myself and my own curiosities about art, the conditions of society. I also publish an essay every week on Monday. I have a little reading coven that, if that calls you, you can subscribe to just on my website. And then I just send out an essay every Monday called Monday Musings, where I really just autopsy different aspects of the human condition. And so those are all the ways that you can interact with me. And of course, I love when people feel called into the workshop, feel called into receiving the medicine in, in a comprehensive way like that, and taking it back and applying it to their lives and integrating it into their wellness.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.